A Judeo-Christian Guide to Healing from Complex Trauma by Valerie Lynn Stevens. Will complex trauma ever be fully validated by the medical establishment? While there may be individuals who work within the mental health field who would agree with the soundness of the verity that complex interpersonal trauma injuries sustained as children and adults needs much more inclusion in the diagnoses of individuals seeking treatment in the mental health field, the fact is that there are too many larger forces at play which keep the system where it is and what it is. I, like so many others, have learned this the hard way. In attempting to point out how things like emotional abuse and abuses as a child and as an adult can be invalidated as direct causes of complex trauma, many working within the mental health field do not want to acknowledge this. Furthermore, the issue gets muddied by focusing too much upon purely physiological factors, intentionally in some cases. Being treated with dignity and respect in the mental health field can be tricky due to this. I think this is mainly because many people don't want to face it or deal with these dark realities present in themselves and in others. Yet, I think it is safe to say that most of the emotional duress which human beings undergo, which then may lead to mental health diagnoses, is a direct and indirect cause of interpersonal trauma and abuses. But the truth is, there are a lot of people who are still hoodwinked by the system. I was partly hoodwinked for a time myself. If we fail to dig deep and treat the whole person, then people will not be helped. People need genuine and active compassion and understanding, not more labeling, mismanaging, invalidation, and judgment. Moreover, the absence of an awareness of having deeper trauma does not mean that one does not have it. If every human being on the face of the planet dug really deep, they'd find it. Some people are just not as self-aware. To be human is by essence to have been traumatized or adversely affected by at least something. Furthermore, it doesn't matter how seemingly small or prolonged trauma is, it is all profoundly impacting upon us. And in response to those who make the fallacious and Cartesian claim that we must focus upon the neurochemical imbalances present in trauma survivors, at the expense of the deeper issues underlying the etiology of such neurochemical imbalances, the two are not mutually exclusive, and it is harmful to treat them as such. And this is what we mean by treating the whole person. Therapy, medication if necessary and helpful, and also trauma processing of our own volition. Things like depression, anxiety, etc. do not arise out of a vacuum, and the chemical imbalances and other health issues that they cause are directly related to psychological and emotional duress of some variation or another. While it is true that not all hardships cause major mental health issues in and of themselves, the nature of emotional and psychological trauma is usually cumulative, not just incidental, and this supports what we are coming to understand and what we know about the interconnectivity and web-like functionality of neuroanatomical structuring. Furthermore, it is a gross misconception that trauma can only be caused in the minds of children and not adults. I personally find the whole Western approach to medicine a bit reductionistic, facile, and ultimately have seen the harm that it does to the human soul, my own included. And an individual being treated for depression is also an individual being treated, hopefully, for some kind of underlying issue. The two are usually not mutually exclusive entities. Yet here, ladies and gents, is where we enter into the realm of physiology versus metaphysiology, that epic dialectic between the exoteric and the esoteric. I personally believe that human beings are far too complex to be reduced to merely physiological epiphenomena. This is the problem with using only the Western model of medical science. too Cartesian for my own personal knowledge and experience base. It is so important that the medical community not dismiss some of what's regarded as the soft sciences as completely complementary to so-called hard science. Realms such as philosophy, psychology, theology, sociology, etc., are equally necessary to study for healthy and optimal development and treatment of the human person. In finale, as with all tools, it's about the intentions of those wielding them which determines its helpfulness or harmfulness. There are good people working in the mental health system, as well as not so good folks. It is what it is, but we can all make the best of it, and we must take the reins on our own health, well-being, and growth. But those helping us along the way also need to make sure that they are operating within the bounds of that as well. It's a collaborative effort, or at least it should be. And from my own experience, some practitioners misuse their knowledge with the intention of exploiting vulnerable people who merely end up being re-traumatized. That's what I was referring to about wielding it properly. An individual's existentialia, as Martin Heidegger called it, is very, very pertinent information regarding not only understanding the presented condition but also treatment. Overall, I think that the DSM would benefit from having the etiology of all psychiatric conditions listed, especially as it relates to trauma. After all, why should more credibility be given for, say, strictly physical designation or condition than a mental one regarding its origins and causes? Also, we now know that the holistic model is being proven more and more comprehensive and accurate as far as diagnosis, prognosis, etc. are concerned. Mind and body are most definitively, symbiotically ensconced. Hopefully, as our knowledge and understanding expands, we will begin to grant more robust medical credibility to trauma-related conditions, which cannot be strictly classified as having a physiological and/or neurophysiological etiology. This approach, while perhaps not intended by everyone who uses it, is very invalidating and dismissive, thus injurious to survivors of horrific childhood and adulthood trauma and abuse, whose diagnosed conditions are a direct consequence of their interpersonal traumas. The biochemical model for psychiatry is also understood by most professionals and laymen alike as being postulate. In a word, the hard sciences approach for psychological diagnostics and treatment arose out of humankind's attempt to explain and then treat what is more philosophically understood as the human condition as it struggles to survive the horrors of evil on this earth. I suppose this more rigorous, honest, and inclusive approach depends upon whether or not an individual acknowledges the verity of phenomena which lie beyond the borders of hard science, and whether or not that individual is viewing ultimate reality with eyes wide open or eyes wide shut. If it be the latter, they become merely yet another part of the problem, rather than the solution. And these issues, of course, beg a whole other discussion. Postscript. John Muldrow wrote an interesting and quite compelling book which explores this subject entitled How to Become a Schizophrenic: The Case Against Biological Psychiatry.